Hello and welcome to Married Life with Sven and Laura. It's such an honor and a privilege to have you here. We've been married for 16-ish years and it's been awesome. Lots of ups and downs, and we've traveled through life and traveled through marriage together. And we want to share some of our lessons with you, things that we've learned from scripture and through practice. And today what we want to talk about really is what are the roles and expectations in marriage, because if we get confused about what our biblical roles are, we can actually become disheartened by marriage. And there are clear biblical roles, and those are there to help us to fulfill our roles to one another. And I heard Craig Rochelle say that to be clear is to be kind. And so if we can be clear on the roles and expectations that we have of one another and what God's expectations of us are as married couples, then we are being kind to our spouses. The Proverbs also says that hope deferred makes the heart sick. If you always unmet expectations, you'll actually find that you become discouraged in your marriage and that your expectations aren't being met. And that can actually lead you to look at fulfilling those expectations in other places and in other ways. But yeah, so we want to speak into that. When two people get married, it's not 1 + 1 = 2, it's 1 + 1 = 1. And so the way that I was saying to Laura before this was that it's kind of like your brain. Your brain is one organ, but it has two hemispheres. And so as a married couple, we have different roles and different responsibilities before God that makes our marriage one and unique and beautiful. And so that's what we want to talk about today. And so it's going to be roles and expectations for marriage before God. So yeah, I hope that you enjoy this episode and that it'll add value to your life. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe if you want to receive more content like this. Like it, share it if there's somebody that you know could benefit from it. So that was when you want to say hello, because I've been talking for way too long here.
Hello everyone, welcome to our talk today. And I just want to say we've been having lots of pancakes.
Too many pancakes, actually.
Yes.
But they're so good. They're so good.
And our roles are defined when we make pancakes. I make the batter and Sven fries the pancakes.
That's right.
It's clear. We know what we're doing. We get in there, we make those pancakes, and then we enjoy them.
That's right. Laura makes the best batter. Unless she doesn't, then I have to get all like leadership wise in there. But no, I'm joking. How do you like your pancakes? What's your go-to pancake filling?
If I didn't care about kilojoules,
No, that's off the table. Off the table for you guys as well. Off the table.
Caramel.
Wow. Okay. What's your favorite pancake filling? I'd love to know. Mine that I've settled on right now is a thin spread of peanut butter with a drizzle of honey on top of that, wrapped up and deliciously chomped. But yeah, so roles and responsibilities. We're at pancakes. That's how bad things are. But yeah, I think when we look at what are the biblical roles for husband and wives before God, you see, it's not just that we have roles between one another and expectations and that they're interchangeable roles and it's just about getting the right things done. There is an element of that, but there is actually some key roles that God holds us to. So in Ephesians chapter 5, we see Paul is speaking to people. He's primarily trying to speak about the church, the relationships within the church and how the church is unified in Christ in one body and it's mysterious. So he goes, the best analogy that I can give for a church is the husband and wife and the marriage relationship there. And in that section, he actually talks about the roles that God has placed on the different spouses. And so it's not that one is more important than the other. They're both of equal value. So that's what we're saying.
Yes.
Husband and wife are of equal value before God. They just have different roles and different responsibilities. And so when God holds us accountable to the marriages that we have, he holds us accountable to different roles.
And this goes back to the Garden of Eden. Adam was made and he was naming all the animals. And then God created a helper for him. And that was the role that Eve had, to be a helper. But nowhere did it say that she was inferior. She was created of the same flesh, the same bone as Adam. She was equal to him. but her role in the Garden of Eden was to be a helper.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. And you know what I find is so interesting is that couples, I mean, we're attracted to people that are completely different to us. From a scientific standpoint, is there any reason for that? Strengthening the genetic pool?
Yes, it strengthens the genetic pool, but I know one thing genetically is that people with very different immunities will be attracted to each other because they smell different. So without even knowing it, you're smelling the immunity of the other person.
How crazy.
And you are joining with someone who has a very different immunity to you so that you can give your children a balanced immunity.
I mean, that's really cool. But so, I mean, you know that when you look at your spouse, they're like from a different planet sometimes. I mean, that's just how it is. We're just so different to one another a lot of the time. And that's good, which means that sometimes one spouse has a stronger personality than another spouse, or more confrontational personality. We're not really talking about that as it relates to roles. What we're talking about is, as a husband, what does God expect of me within my marriage? And as a wife, what does God expect of Laura as it relates to our marriage? And so right off the bat, it's always an awkward issue, but Paul talks about this idea of mutual submission, and Laura was talking about it as well. It's not different value. It's just we serve one another and the family in different ways. And so what God holds the husband responsible for is the leadership and the direction of the relationship, of the marriage. And so when God looks at the husband, he's saying, I have placed the responsibility of leadership over the family into your care. God always works through levels of authority. Even governments and levels of authority, they're placed, they're instituted by God. Like even in heaven, there is layers of authority. And so authority is a good thing when it's used well, when it's used to be mutually submitted. We're not talking about a dictatorship. We're not talking about autocracy. We're talking about servant leadership in a sense where Paul says you are to lead the family, but you're supposed to look after your wife the way you look after yourself. In fact, you're supposed to put her needs ahead of your own needs. And so that is the counterbalance and the counterweight of the husband leading and being responsible for the spiritual direction of the family, the financial direction of the family, even if he is not financially brilliant. Okay. So basically what happens is wherever the family goes, God doesn't look at your wife and go, how did you let this happen? He looks at the husband and says, how did you let this happen? Or, well done, you're on a good track, you're doing well, you're being faithful, you're committing to the right things. Remember in the Garden of Eden, God didn't say Eve, he said Adam. What's going on? Yes, there was communication to both, but ultimately he held Adam responsible. And so in our families, God looks to the husband and holds us responsible. So that's why we ought to lead well. And that's also why Paul says that wives ought to make it easy for their husbands to lead.
And this doesn't mean that the wife abdicates all responsibility. She's there to support her husband and give him all the information he needs, all the help he needs, all the information he needs to make the right decisions. So it's not that the husband makes a decision in a vacuum.
Very important.
He speaks to his wife, gets information, and then makes the decisions that he will be held responsible for before God.
And maybe what might help people is even to think about how we make decisions, generally speaking. Yeah. I mean, we're not talking about what are we going to eat for lunch today, but we're talking about very serious and important decisions. How do people, what would you say to people how we go through the decision-making process on where we're going, what we're doing, and how we're doing it?
Well, I would say that there's always an element of prayer. God is the ultimate authority over our marriage. And so we always pray to him. We always ask him for guidance. And then we sit down and we discuss where we're going and how it's going to happen. And then the final decision is on Sven's shoulders.
But what I know is that once we've gone through that process and I've deeply heard Lara and I've taken her advice in and continue to pray, like, I know that once a decision is made, whether Lara 100% agrees with it or not, she's always fully supportive of it. That's what I know, because we've gone through that process together, and that almost that delegate or that burden is now passed on. And so it's important. It's really important. I know that guys, husbands generally are very happy to take a responsibility over the protection of the family and even the financial provision a lot of the time. But we need to take leadership over the health of our marriage. We need to take leadership in the areas of romance, and I often lack in that. I really do. Just to be open and honest, I struggle. All these things I'm talking to us about, I struggle. It's a daily struggle for me. But even the spiritual temperature of our marriage, or the spiritual temperature of the family life, as we have a relationship with God, you've got to take leadership in that area. You can't lack. You can't abdicate leadership. You have to take responsibility, because God's going to hold us accountable, and He's going to reward us as well for what we have done. And so I want us to be rewarded well, and that is the basis as well for a healthy marriage. And like I was saying, the other part that Paul talks about is how husbands ought to serve their wives, love their wives, cherish their wives, as though they're looking after their own bodies. He says, you like to eat good food. You like maybe some of you like to exercise and treat your bodies really well. He's saying, why would you treat your body well but not your wife well? In a sense, you've got to treat your wife like your body. And so that means sometimes dying to your own ambitions. It means dying to sometimes couch time. It means dying to maybe some free time you wanted, and you could actually use that time to serve your wife in the way that she loves best. And so we'll get to that by the end of the episode. But it could look like washing dishes. It could look like taking out the trash, doing the gardening, whatever that looks like for her. It's to put her needs ahead of your own needs. And maybe it's as big as, hey, I've got this promotion and it's taking our family to another city, or it means more work hours. Even maybe sometimes being willing to say no to that, because it's going to benefit your wife and your family. And that's a hard thing to do, but that's what it means to put someone else's needs ahead of your own. Maybe you want to share some things of what the role biblically is for a wife and in a relationship.
Well, it says in Ephesians 5 that the wife must respect her husband. And respect is assigning value to something. You assign value to a piece of jewelry. So you don't throw it around, you don't lose it, you look after it, you put it in a box, you put it in a special place, you assign value to it. And in the same way, we need to assign value to our husbands. We need to look at them and say, they're valuable. They're made in God's image. God has a plan and purpose for them. They are precious to us. And that is reflected in how we serve them, the words we use, and how we respond to the decisions they make. And so respect can sometimes seem a bit airy-fairy, but it's concrete in the way we act, and very importantly in the words we say. And I think it's important to add here that when you respect someone, you don't go to a party and huddle with your girlfriends and say derogatory things about your husband. That is not the way to show respect. Same
for husbands, by the way.
Yeah, in public, people should see that you think highly of your spouse, that you value them, and that they are worthy of respect. And then when you come home after the party, carry on that respect. Don't say, what were you saying and what were you doing? And no, carry on that respect. And words are very important to us. And so we are quite careful with the things we say to each other. And I think over the years that has built up a lot of trust between us because we know that we respect each other.
Yeah, it's a value in our home because I always think that you create the marriage that you have by the words that you use. And when we speak well of one another, we actually train ourselves to value those words and to honor those words. And so it's not flattery. It's just speaking kind of what you see as real in the other person. And so, yeah, I think it just gets better. Practically, what would you say are there any other ways that you think that your role in the marriage or relating to Ephesians 5 would work?
Well, I think we...
Like day-to-day stuff.
Day-to-day. Well, one thing is that you have meetings, and my way to serve Sven is that I look after Samuel. And I once read something that Bobby Houston said about her relationship with Brian Houston, who's the head of Hillsong. And she said the fruit that Brian was reaping from his ministry was their fruit.
Good. So good.
As a unit, the fruit that your marriage is reaping belongs to both of you. So I don't see myself as losing out because I'm at home and Sven is in
at
front
night,
of,
yeah. Because you got a job, yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I do work during the day. Sven is, an Empower night and he's on the other side of the microphone and I'm putting Samuel to bed. I haven't lost out because the fruit of our ministry, we are sharing it. And there have been some times when I had to lead meetings and then Sven was with Samuel. And so we've shared the responsibility.
Absolutely.
But I think we can support our husbands maybe in their tasks that they're doing by looking after things at home. And I once also read that the wife might be this high-powered career lady, but homemaking is still her responsibility.
Good.
So she might have a housekeeper and do online shopping and get in a decorator.
Pre-cooked meals.
Yeah, pre-cooked meals. She might do that, but she's still creating a home.
Wow.
So the way that we create home will all be different because of our responsibilities and maybe what we have to do with the kids or with jobs. But the final responsibility for creating home is the wife.
That's very good. And I think even just for husbands to realize that doesn't give us permission to go and fully work and fully forget about family life and home life. It really means that we've got to honor that time that we're released to do what we're called to do. And some of you might be, it's not ministry, although sometimes it is. Sometimes it's your job and your career. And you've got to be released in certain moments and seasons, but it's always to bring back health by then coming back and saying, okay, I'm going to serve you. Family time is important. And you've got to be open when your wife speaks to you about it, because your wife's not a doormat or a full-time babysitter while you're off searching your career out. And honestly, at times I've gotten that wrong, and I've had to hear from Lara say, no, we've got to put a schedule in place that brings balance and health. And so maybe one of the expectations that already you can be speaking about as a result of this video is to go, okay, what does our calendar look like together that we can both agree on, that we can make home, there can be homemaking, there can be ministry or career in both hands, and family is healthy. How can we agree on a schedule or a calendar or a process? We've had to bump our heads quite a lot to get to a calendar that we both agree on and go, okay, that is healthy most of the time. And of course, then it goes either way. In different seasons, there's always a different season of extra work or extra time at home, but it should never be a prolonged season of that. And so talking about expectations. And this bleeds over to what we'll be talking about in our next video next month, which is going to be about effective communication and even conflict resolution. That should be so much fun. My hat. Anyways, we'll get into that next week. I think coming back to the point of to be clear is to be kind. We're kind to our spouse when we can be clear about what our biblical mandate, our biblical roles are before God, what God's going to hold us responsible for, and then clear on our expectations with one another. And so there is that. So I guess, is there anything else you wanted to say on that? No, cool. I think we wanted to just go from here and go, okay, how can we meet each other's expectations? Because unmet expectations are the worst. But more often than not, that's where we're all living in, because we've forgotten or failed to communicate our expectations with one another. I don't know if this has happened to you, but for us it's happened like on a weekly basis.
Yes.
I thought you were gonna know, but I thought you were gonna, we got it wrong.
I think things and I think that I've said them, but
Totally.
I haven't. And then I'm like, you were supposed to do this.
Or Lara would say, but I sent it in a message, or didn't you read it? And I'm like, I kind of half read my messages. It's so bad. I kind of scan it to get the most important parts. And as a man, or maybe just me, I have selective forgetfulness. So I choose what to forget. And so just clarity around expectations. Like, I'm not saying you have to write up everything, but just generally communicate what your expectations are of one another. Like Lara's had to speak to me numerous times and saying, I feel like I'm the only one doing house chores. And I'm like, that's right. I don't want to admit that. And I've said, okay, I'm going to help more around those areas. So I try to do them more. I don't think I'm perfect at it, but trying. And so what are the expectations? And also the key thing is what are the expectations? Because being different people from different backgrounds and made up differently, there are different things that we like and different things we don't care about. So for instance, and this really comes out of the basis or the idea from, what's the guy's name? Gary Chapman, on the 5 love languages. And he posits or thinks about this idea that there are 5 ways that people feel loved. Do you remember what they are?
Words of affirmation, physical touch, acts of service, affection, and quality time.
Boom, 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 5 out of 5. Exactly. And so for some people, to buy them a gift means nothing, but to make them breakfast means everything. For instance, I think one of the ideas or one of the stories that I heard was, it's like making somebody a cup of coffee, and you've put all this time and dedication into it because you love coffee. You've taken it through the beautiful process, the grinding and the perfect amount, and you boiled the kettle to the perfect temperature. You've filtered it just the way you love it, and then you serve it to your spouse, except they don't like coffee. And so they don't even say thank you. And you feel offended, and they feel unloved. When actually what they wanted was a cup of rooibos tea, steeped to the perfect temperature and all that, with a little bit of honey in it, served with a little vanilla biscuit perhaps. And you don't like that because you don't like tea, but they love tea, and that's how they feel appreciated. And I think that's what we're trying to get to. How can we meet each other's expectations with our unique roles in marriage so that the other person can feel their needs are being met, they're feeling loved, and they're feeling topped up?
And if you search the 5 love languages and you go to the website, they have a little quiz, and you can see what your love languages are, and your spouse can take the quiz as well, and they can see their love language.
Absolutely. So like maybe you can give an idea of, for people just as a practical sense again, what are some of the expectations you have in our relationship and the ways that you feel loved, and whether that works or not? Or if I'm matching up at least a little bit.
Well, for me, it's important to me for words of affirmation. So I want to be encouraged. I want to be spoken to with respect. I don't like jokes about me. And words of affirmation are very important to Sven. So he is very good at speaking to me in the way that I prefer. And then quality time is very important to me. And Sven did not grow up with his family having quality time. They would hang out in front of the TV, and that was like amazing.
That was time.
And that is not quality time.
It's time.
You see, it's different. There's nothing wrong with it. It was just different to the way I was brought up. I was brought up, you go somewhere and you spend time, you talk a lot, and you stare deeply into each other's eyes. So Sven had to learn, and he's still learning, but he has come a long way. He has come a long way. And so I really appreciate that. And then I think having a busy schedule, acts of service are also, I really appreciate that as well. When he unpacks the dishwasher or hangs up the clothes, it really makes me feel at ease.
Yeah, and for me, it's generally just two, is words of affirmation. Like if I've done something, I want to hear, oh, I'm so thankful for you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. It was quite special. Or, after I preach, I don't want to hear what I did wrong. I just want to hear, that was great, whether it was authentic or not. Anyway, I just want to hear, I want to be affirmed. I obviously I want to be respected, but I think that comes out of already from a place of affirmation. And then the other one is physical touch. I feel loved by being touched in a sense. And so Lara's actually had to learn that, and it's not natural for her, but she has learned, and she's learned to scratch my back or make sure that she does touch me from time to time in a way that shows affection. I think that's it, it's showing the person's affection. So she might not be topped up on that, but I get topped up on that. And so those are just practical ways of some minor expectations that you can already begin to discuss and work through. Say, okay, how do we feel most loved? How do we feel most cherished? And then work within those parameters. It might not be natural to you, but it will bless your marriage in 100%. Yes. Yeah. Any closing thoughts on this?
I just want to share a funny story.
Okay, that's all we have time for today.
When I was at home, my dad would pack the boot of the car when we went on holiday.
Come on, you can bring this up.
Yes. So we would take all the luggage to him, and he would pack the boot of the car. So Sven and I got married, and Sven and I went on our first holiday, and I took all the luggage to the car, and I stood there waiting for Sven to pack the car. And he looked at me and he was like, why didn't you put it in the boot? And I was like, that's your job. So I had an unmet expectation, something I never communicated. And over the years, I have packed a couple of boots myself.
Helped pack the boot. Not done it yourself, helped. Like just put it in the boot and then it gets rearranged in the boot.
And Sven has also packed the boots. So we have created a new thing where we're both happy and we still go on holiday with all our stuff. So communicate and find what works for you.
Totally. I love that. Thanks for bringing that up. But I hope it's been helpful to you guys. Again, if you have any questions, things that you would like us to speak into, maybe one of these episodes, we can actually just answer questions. So just send them in through the comment section. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Hope it's added value to you. And if you know someone that this could be useful for, share it with them. But God bless you. We pray for a blessed marriage and a fruitful marriage for you and for those you know. God bless.